Good morning. High production values this morning for explanation of Euler and Levy and the interim axis theorem, and why does it flip periodically. So I'm trying to go. So here is a hemisphere. I want you to imagine that is a perfect hemisphere. It can spin about this axis, okay? About this axis, and it can rotate about that axis. So I can explain its axes like that it's got its spin axis and it's got its orbital axis. These are the strong forces. These are the universal forces. We can forget them. This is constructing the x and y. So I want you to imagine that it's spinning at the speed c, and that when it reaches its velocity c, there's a slowing effect which is created inside. But assume a slowing effect. And what it will try to do, it will try to orbit. Now, I don't believe it can spin and orbit at the same time. That's chaotic motion. It can't do it. So it tries to turn on its y-axis. There'll be a force emitted there at this, as it tries to turn. The shape of that bending will be bending this way. This will be bending this way as I try and force this in that direction. So you can see there's force here. If there is resistance to orbital force, that force will end up right there in the center as heat and friction, as an attempt to spin. So I'm not trying to say this is at high speed velocity. It's spinning at high speed. So that's our inertial frame of reference. We can forget this rotation, and we're looking at this force, and we know that there is a force there from the orbital force. We see orbital motion. We know orbital motion must create a force at the center. Okay, so now imagine within this XY axis, there's a Z axis. Now, this Z axis is free to rotate from the X axis. It's independent. And in fact, its position here is forced into 90 degrees, but it could have been anywhere on this axis. It's just saying it's free, independent to spin. It too is subject to the force that we know exists in here. So we've now got an independent axis subject to force, which is going to be creating heat, friction, heat, temperature change is going to be going on in here. If this is made of matter, then the outer bearing is made of matter, then that is going to become austenitic, fluid, solid solution, to allow this force to do something. Yeah? So spin and force. So this bearing this Z bearing is created from the force. And you can see it's got a hole in it. It must have a hole in it, which means that the axes can't intersect. The Z axis must be independent. And this is the point. How is it possible? If you have an atom, and this is describing the center of an atom, how is there room how does this whole realize it? How is this a free motion? Okay. And so this is where it takes us into Levy, hopefully. Here is my atom, the time particle now. Imagine there's my center hole. Imagine this lives in there, and it is rotate. It is free to rotate within its XY axis. Let's see that. That looks lovely. It's free to rotate inside there. In this direction. It's also subject to orbital force. It cannot align with the y-axis. It must be offset. Its orbital motion cannot be that. It must be tilted slightly so that from here the y-axis would go the y-axis would come up there, let's say. Yeah, tilted off of it. It holds itself in balance. So here's now our x-axis, spin force. Here is our y, orbital spin motion, orbital force, creating our center of our structure, center of our atom. Inside that atom is our two-dimensional wave. What's happened is that because this is spinning, its fluid solution is spinning. Dog's gone mad. The fluid solution is spinning, and therefore it's spinning so fast that it just takes up this position across the equator. It can't stick to the sides. It's a single entity across the center. So that the forces that created this center of the axis, those forces are now concentrated two-dimensionally. And the effect of that is that they are different. The meter and the second, the time and the space are mixed here. And their entities are vacuum and light. Meters to the minus cubed, c squared. It's imbalanced. Leve proves the imbalance. We know that it spins off center. Leve's proved it when he takes the 0 point and he splits it into 6 supports and analyzes it using matrix calculus, finds that it spins off center. Because it spins off center, mass gravitates here. I believe that is a piece of ice that rotates there, and it creates an electromagnetic field. It is that motion which is a free bearing entirely because it floats in an electromagnetic field there and there, here, here and here, there and there. So it's created in the past there. In the next moment it appears here. It creates a field there, like that. An EM field, a torus is created there. This causes an actual piece of mass is balanced by the waterfall. Now, remember we've drawn this as a waterfall. I've done the picture now. Drawn it as a waterfall, so that this is a vortex is created there and a vortex is created here. And the two things are balanced. The balance of the mass creates the balance of the vector axis. As it rotates, this vector axis is wobbling, but it's balanced by the mass. But it's so fine. It's carrying its electromagnetic field. It's created from the motion of the grit of ice, which gives it everything to bite on. It's a real thing. It has no friction at all. And it's that piece of matter that creates the gravity, that creates the field, that creates this, that creates that a field. So when you scale this back up again, back up to our planet, you see that the y motion of the orbital motion of the planet is not the y, the universal y, it's the y of the z, slightly off. That's true north, that's compass north, and it can change. And the reason the magnetic pole switches is going to occur is that as this becomes degraded through gravity increasing excessively, as it is through behavior of us, apex species, this is out of balance and this is moving. It's in the wrong place. It's not 137, it's 137 and a bit. We know it is. We know h is not 2 pi, it's 6.626, so they say. And so it's all out of balance. It simply switches over. It goes, I think it switches in, it does one motion. It switches so that the vacuum is underneath and the light is on top. That can't be like that. It's not natural. It'll just switch back again. So there'll be a flick, flick, flick. Where will it end up? That is the point. Younger Dryas, to me, indicates 2 magnetic pole switches. One, when the magnetic pole switch went like that, went about 27 degrees off, something like that, and put the whole northern hemisphere into an ice age for 10,000 years. Because of the behavior of the species in that period, when the magnetic pole switch ran through again, bang, it was back to perfect. And they built Göbekli Tepe because it was an anti-gravity world. Low gravity. Stone was soft and people could fly. So long, wasn't sure I was going to go to, of course, people flying. That seems a bit crazy, but it's true. I believe this is true. It explains the Nazca lines, and all the ancient messages that we're getting are explained through this idea of the interim axis theorem. Just go back to the GIF of the linkaged pendulum. a pendulum linked together with 3 node points. Those 3 node points are the same place in simultaneous time. When we measure them from our side, they are a single point, but they're actually 3 second moments of area establishing themselves in each moment. So the bending force expressing itself through the 2 relationships of pi and E as it decays. Is that enough? Can we start yet? Welcome to New Earth.